The July 27, 2023 meeting of the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability is called to order at 6:37 PM. We will begin with a call of the roll. Commissioner Brown,
Present.
Commissioner Drivers present, Commissioner Gomez,
Present.
Commissioner Loizen, Commissioner Nellis, Commissioner Terry,
Present.
Commissioner Troncoso.
Present.
We have 6 out of 7 members of the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability present, and we have a quorum, and we can conduct the commission's business. We'll begin with our next item of business, which is public comment. If you would like to share something related to the commission's work on public safety and accountability, you have a few options. You can speak at a public meeting. You can also submit comment in writing by emailing your comment to Community Commission Public Comment at cityofchicago.org, or you can bring a copy of your comment to one of the commission's public meetings to give it to someone on the commission or someone on the commission staff. People who wanted to speak during the public comment period tonight were asked to submit their names in writing earlier tonight. Names were then drawn at random by a member of the commission staff. If your name is called to offer public comment, we ask that you approach the microphone and line up in the order in which your name is called. When it's your turn to speak, please say your name for the record and then spell your name and then offer your comments. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. We have allotted a total of 20 minutes for public comment. Our first speaker is Ariana Correa, who is also a member of our Non-Citizen Advisory Council, which will be followed by Joe Icebaker and Lee Bilecki. We have 2 on Zoom, right? The button. You can turn it on.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ariana Correa, and I serve as an appointed member of the Non-Citizen Advisory Council. And tonight, I'd like to highlight the investigation into allegations that CPD officers are have sexually abused or raped migrant women. COPA's press conference made it clear that the investigation is ongoing, but that fear is a big factor in people being willing to talk. Our hope as a council is to keep shining a light on this issue for our non-citizen community members who are not able or fearful of voicing their public comments. Just because they can't find people willing to talk doesn't mean it didn't happen, and we should all be concerned that there are active duty officers who could have done this. We should also look into sustainable ways to provide mental health supports for our new neighbors as well. I'd like to uplift the Illinois Department of Human Services, the Coalition for Immigrant Mental Health, Chicago's Crown Family School of Social Work Policy and Practice, as well as Lurie Children's Hospital for training Spanish-speaking frontline staff across the city to deliver emotional wellness educational group sessions to migrants. And finally, I'd like to say thank you to Commissioner Brown and Commissioner Gomez for your active communication with the members of the Non-Citizen Advisory Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe.
Good evening, Joe Osbaker, Joeosbaker. I live in the 3rd District, and I'm the Labor Committee co-chair of the Chicago Alliance Against Race. That just got much louder. Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. So I want to follow up on, I'm sorry, your name is Ayana? Ayana? Ariana, lo siento. I want to follow up on her comments. So since the press broke the story about the asylum seekers being sexually assaulted by the police officers, you know, the members of our community have been demanding justice. You know, more stories have emerged, like in the 14th district, where a sergeant sicked her dog on several migrants in order to intimidate them. So district counselors, I know, have joined the community in demands for justice in both the 10th and the 14th districts. It seems to me that the counselors, the only people elected to hold the police accountable, should have been among the first to be informed of those complaints. Instead, we saw that COPA received the complaints but had no direct communication with the counselors in those districts. And we've also learned, and this is an even in some ways a bigger problem, that the complaints are being handled by internal affairs I don't think I have to tell you that internal affairs was failed so badly in holding police accountable. That's the reason that COPA was created. Originally, IPRA was created because of the failure of internal affairs to actually, bring about any accountability. So toward accountability, one, the commission should investigate how these went to internal affairs. And I want to suggest you provide a plan how to change that, to direct these away from internal affairs. Two, please tell COPA that they should work more closely with the counselors. When incidents like these arise, COPA should attend council meetings as a matter of course. And finally, make whatever changes to policies and procedures to result in an investigation that, holds those cops accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee?
So good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the commission. First of all, let me congratulate you on all the hard work you put in for the superintendent search. I've heard it was very tedious and long, hard work. Hopefully the mayor will make his decision soon. But on to the business at hand. One question that's never been answered I can't find anybody that would answer this question. Who made the decision to house the migrants in police stations that were ill-equipped to meet their needs? Nobody seems to want to answer that question. McCormick Place was set up during the pandemic to cover the overflow that never materialized to house COVID patients. Why couldn't that same thing be done for the migrants? It would have been a suitable facility, and it would have been a lot easier, given some of the comments here tonight. Let me address those comments tonight too about the allegations against Chicago police officers. The police officers, obviously anybody can make an anonymous complaint that has to be investigated by COPA. So we don't know if somebody just had something out for the police, made these things. There's no victims that can be found. COPA has tried to all ends to find these people. No victims were discovered. So how do we even know if the assaults occurred? Moving on from that, yeah, obviously I agree. COPA should be doing a little bit more than what they're doing. It takes them forever to do an investigation on a police officer. And then something else I want to call, obviously Commissioner Nellis isn't here tonight, but on July 17th, the Sun-Times reported that former Cook County Public Defender Amy Campanelli misused confidential information by supplying names and information about children her office defended. Campanelli signed an agreement, information sharing agreement with Commissioner Nellis and his Lawndale Christian Legal Center without the required court authorization to maintain funding for his organization. A noble program, no doubt.
Sorry, Lee, that's
I got you.
2 minutes. We have two speakers. We have two speakers who are joining us via Zoom. The first being Karen Winters. Karen Winters. And Kobe Guillory.
Hello, is it my time now? Okay, so hello everybody, my name is Kobe Guillory. That's K-O-B-I-G-U-I-L-L-O-R-Y. I'm a member of the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and I'm also a resident of the 10th Police District. And as a resident of the 10th District, I've joined many of my neighbors in demanding justice for the asylum seekers who were sexually assaulted by police. It's disappointing that the majority of complaints against these officers were referred to internal affairs. Whether that was because of a mistake on anybody's part or because a policy is incorrect, that needs to be changed. because we know from a very long history of police violence against Black and brown people that the police do not adequately investigate themselves. In fact, we fought for ECPS so the community would have the power to hold the police accountable. But ECPS on paper is like a broom in the closet. It doesn't work if you don't use it. COPA did not adequately communicate with the 10th district councilors about the incident in the 10th district. The district councilors were elected to empower the people to have a voice in saying who polices the community and how it's policed. That means the community needs to be involved in the accountability process. So I'm asking the commission to do what you can to facilitate connection between COPA and the district councils. We have to work together to hold the rapist cops in the 10th district accountable for their crimes. And we need to keep pushing for more transparency and accountability from CPD. What happened in the 10th district is not an isolated case. We've already heard about the 14th district. There's been similar allegations in the 19th district. And of course, police have been committing crimes against Black and brown people basically forever because the system has always let them get away with it. Now, we fought tooth and nail to get ECPS so police don't keep getting away with crimes. Now we have to use ECPS. That means working with the district councilors and the community commission to dismantle the old system and build something that actually keeps us safe. So I'm asking y'all to do what you can to make sure that there is an adequate investigation into this matter and that the community is actually involved in the investigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kobe. That concludes our public comment section of the meeting, portion of the meeting. The next order of business is approval of the minutes. For today's meeting, draft minutes of the commission's meeting held May 25th, 2023 were shared with all commissioners. Are there any corrections to the draft minutes that have been circulated? If there are no corrections, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the commission meeting held on May 25th?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Brown has moved to approve the minutes of the commission's May 25th meeting and Commissioner Gomez has seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, we'll now move to a vote. Those in favor of adopting the motion to approve the minutes of the commission's May 25th meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? The ayes have it and the motion carries. Our next order of business will be the approval of a series of closed meetings related to appointments. Over the next several months, sorry, this keeps falling. Over the next several months, the commission will be engaging in the process of selection of candidates for publicly held positions as dictated by the ordinance. This will require a series of closed meetings related to those selections, including members of the police board. The selection, Section 2C3 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act allows the commission to meet in closed session to consider the following subject: the selection of a person to fill a public office as defined in this act, including a vacancy in a public office, when the public body is given power to appoint under law or ordinance, or the discipline, performance, or removal of the occupant of a public office when the public body is given the power to remove the occupant under law or ordinance. Section 2A of the act authorizes the commission to take a vote to hold a series of closed meetings over the course of not more than 3 months from today, and only for the purposes cited under Section 2C3. I move to hold a series of closed meetings to take place for the maximum period allowable as authorized by Section 2C3 of the Open Meetings Act. Is there a second?
Second.
I have moved to hold a series of closed meetings to take place for the maximum period allowable as authorized by Section 2C3 of the Open Meetings Act. Commissioner Gomez has seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, we'll now move to a vote. Those in favor of holding a series of meetings to take place for the maximum time period allowable as authorized by Section 2C3 of the Open Meetings Act, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it and the motion carries. The commission will hold a series of closed meetings to take place for the maximum period allowable as authorized by Section 2C3 of the Open Meetings Act.
Quick point of privilege, President Brown. Rather you-
I guess probably better. Thank you. You all hear me? Our next order of business will be the approval of a selection process for COPA chief and police board members. And for that, I will pass it to Commissioner Loizon.
Thank you. At the commission's public meeting on May 25th, the commission presented drafts of 2 policies for public comment. Procedures for appointing the chief administrator of COPA and procedures for nominating people to serve on the police board. The commission is responsible for each of these actions as part of our oversight authority over COPA and the police board. Before I continue to explain these policies, I want to remind everyone about the important functions of these 2 police accountability bodies. COPA and the police board are both involved in addressing police misconduct. COPA investigates complaints of police misconduct, incidents where an officer uses a firearm, and incidents where a person dies or is injured in police custody, among other things. The police board is a 9-member public body that reviews cases of misconduct brought by the police superintendent and cases of misconduct where COPA and the police superintendent disagree about how an officer should be disciplined. The police board also reviews appeals from people who are found ineligible to serve as sworn officers of the CPD, and they set the rules and regulations for the police department.
We created these policies to give our work more structure and more transparency. We also created them to show compliance with the Chicago Consent Decree. For those who don't know, the Consent Decree is a court settlement from 2019 requiring the Chicago Police Department and the municipal government of Chicago to do a broad overhaul of how policing works in Chicago and to implement long-lasting reforms to police training, policies, and practices. Most of the consent decree's 799 paragraphs outline obligations for the police department. But in the consent decree section on accountability, it contains 2 paragraphs that directly apply to the commission. Paragraph 525, governing the selection of the COPA chief administrator, and paragraph 532, governing the selection of police board members. To comply with these paragraphs, we have drafted these policies to ensure transparency, consistency, and fairness in how the commission carries out these 2 very important appointment and nomination processes. Many of the provisions come straight out of the ordinance that establish the commission's powers, outlining our role of searching for and appointing a COPA chief and searching for and nominating candidates for police board vacancies to the mayor. As a side note, we want to be clear that the drafting of the COPA chief selection policy is not meant to suggest that we are currently searching for a new COPA chief, but it's important to have this policy on the books now so that the commission is prepared for the future. We reviewed the policies with the police board and COPA and received invaluable suggestions from both agencies. We presented the policies in May and held public comment for 2 months. We also sent the policies to all 22 district councils and invited them to share the policies at their monthly meetings and provide input. Finally, we shared the policies in our reporting submission to the consent decree independent monitoring team and the Office of the Illinois Attorney General, the parties directly involved in overseeing the city's compliance with the consent decree. We want to take a moment to thank the monitoring team and the Office of the Attorney General for providing thoughtful and useful suggestions to incorporate into these policies. The commission was created for the same purpose as our consent decree paragraphs, to improve accountability. We see these policies as an important step in that direction, and we look forward to following these policies as blueprints for transparent, community-informed selection procedures.
These policies are available on our website and also on the table outside of the meeting. I want to take a quick moment to highlight one of the key features of the policies, which is the community engagement sections. These include points such as the commission will promote information to the public to help people better understand the important functions COPA and the police board play. The commission will provide an ongoing opportunity for members of the public to contact the commission with comments about COPA, the police board, and their leadership. Regarding the selection of COPA chiefs, the commission will hold a listening session annually with COPA employees as well as an ongoing anonymous survey of COPA employees. Whenever a search commences for a new COPA chief, the commission will hold 4 public hearings on the search process, 1 on the north side, 1 on the south side, 1 on the west side, and 1 virtually. These hearings will take place prior to the evaluation of any applications we receive for COPA chief. To aid in the selection of COPA chiefs as well as the selection of police board nominees, the commission will hold an annual listening session with CPD members and their representatives while also maintaining an ongoing anonymous survey. The commission may also hold interviews with subject matter experts. The information we gather through these community engagement strategies will have the added benefit of supporting our annual goal-setting work. The commission is responsible every year in December and January for evaluating the performance of the COPA chief and the police board president over the past year and setting goals for each of them for the upcoming year. These measures we've put in place will therefore not only help us whenever it comes time to appoint a new COPA chief and nominate police board members, they will also equip us in our ongoing work with the existing COPA chief and police board members as well. Finally, the commission will share the information we gather from all these community engagement efforts with the public. We will publish summaries of findings, including any time a suggestion comes in that leads to a change in our selection procedures. This feedback loop is important because it helps us to stay accountable to the communities that we serve, while also educating and informing those communities when it comes to police accountability. To learn more about these policies, I invite you to see them on our website. We welcome your public comments on this subject and encourage you to weigh in and make your voices heard. I now will move that the commission adopt the policies. Oh, yes, and you can also see them on the screen behind me by scanning the QR code as well. I will now move that the commission adopt the policies entitled COPA Chief Administrator Selection Procedures and the policy entitled Police Board Member Selection Procedures.
Seconded.
Commissioners Troncoso and Brown have moved and seconded that the commission adopt the COPA Chief Administrator Selection Procedures and Police Board Member Selection Procedures. Is there any debate on the motion? All those will now move to a vote. Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting these procedures, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it and the motion carries. Our next order of business will be reports and updates. We will begin by providing an update on the conclusion of the superintendent search. Commissioner Terry.
Thank you. Over the past several months, the commission engaged in a search for 3 nominees for superintendent of Chicago Police Department. 2 weeks ago, at a public special meeting of the commission, we voted to present Chief Sean Barnes, Chief Larry Snelling, and Chief Angel Novales to Mayor Johnson as candidates for superintendent. Now that we have sent those candidates to the mayor for consideration, he has until August 13th to select one of the 3 or decline to pick any of the candidates the commission provided. If he declines all of the candidates, the commission, if he declines that the commission provided, he must explain the reasons in writing. And then the commission would need to come up with a new list of 3. That process will continue until the mayor picks a superintendent from the commission's list. The mayor's selection is subject to city council approval. And after the mayor makes a selection and before the city council votes whether to confirm, the commission is required to have a public meeting where the person the mayor selects will have to answer questions from the commission and from members of the public. People will also be able to post questions or make comments on the commission's website. Also, after the city council confirms a candidate, the commission will hold 4 public meetings where the new superintendent can speak and members of the public can comment, ask questions, and make recommendations.
Are there any questions for Commissioner Terry? I would like to just reiterate some of the things she said that I think are really important. During this process, we talked to thousands of people, talked to a lot of different groups, and by ordinance, our job isn't necessarily done. So if and when Mayor Johnson makes a selection, as Commissioner Terry said, that person still has to come back before our commission. So I would encourage all of you all to bring folks to that meeting. There are a lot of people who are very concerned with things that are happening within the police department. And this will be a chance for the public to actually engage with this person before it goes to the city council for a vote. If and when it goes to the city council for a vote and is approved, it then, as she mentioned, comes back before us again for 4 different meetings. And it'd be really great to see the public actually stay engaged throughout this entire process and not tail off after we have now submitted the 3 names. Seeing no further questions on this matter, next we will discuss the status of the police board application process. Commissioner Troncoso.
As I mentioned, the commission carries the responsibility of nominating candidates for the police board. The police board is an important part of our police accountability ecosystem. As we described earlier, the police board is a 9-person body that does a few things, namely reviews and decides on cases of police misconduct brought by the police superintendent against a police officer. It also decides in cases where COPA and the superintendent disagree. It decides on appeals by applicants to be police officers who were disqualified based on a background check. And it also adopts rules and regulations for governing CPD and holds monthly meetings just like we do. Our job is to bring 3 candidates to the mayor's office when a vacancy occurs or is approaching, or we can recommend reappointment of a current member whose term is expiring or has expired. Earlier this year, the commission nominated candidates to fill 3 open seats on the police board. We sent a list of options to then Mayor Lightfoot, who selected 2 new police board members who the city council approved back in April. The application process for the police board is ongoing. Individuals who qualify for the police board can apply at any time by submitting a cover letter, a resume, a list of 5 references, a completed eligibility form, and a completed conflict of interest form. When a vacancy occurs or is approaching, we will consider all applications we've received at that time. But right now, we are actually actively seeking applications. In August, we have 4 potential seats for consideration, almost half the seats on this body. For 3 of the seats, the current member will be seeking reappointment. For the 4th seat, President Guion Foreman will not be seeking reappointment because he has reached his term limit. That means we will have at least 1 seat to fill with new candidates. We will also consider new applications for the other seats, in addition to reviewing applications for reappointment. We're looking to begin interviews in August, so we highly recommend that you submit your application as soon as possible. Again, it's basically a cover letter and a resume along with a few additional forms and some references as well. You can find the details on our website or talk to us afterwards. So again, please submit as soon as possible if you'd like to be considered this time around. And you can email your materials to policeboardnominations@cityofchicago.org. The application materials are on our website, which you can access using the QR code behind me. And again, those required materials, cover letter, resume, 5 references, eligibility form, and conflict of interest form, which are all on our website. To qualify, you must meet the following criteria for the police board. You have to have been a resident of Chicago for the past 5 years. You cannot be a current employee or former employee within the past 5 years of the Chicago Law Department, the Chicago Mayor's Office, CPD, COPA, or the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. You have to have at least 10 years of combined documented experience, including postgraduate education in law enforcement oversight / police accountability, public policy, social work, psychology, mental health, community engagement, or organizing or civil rights. So if you've experienced that combines to 10 years in some or one of those, you may be eligible. You also have to have a bachelor's degree or have the demonstrated capability to digest, analyze, and make decisions based on complicated written materials. You cannot have a conviction in a U.S. court for bribery, embezzlement, extortion, perjury, or any other corruption-related offenses. And for any other conviction, you must be able to show successful rehabilitation. So again, if you would like to apply, go to our website and send applications and questions to policeboardnominations@cityofchicago.org. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Commissioner Troncoso? Seeing no further questions on this matter, we will move on to the status of policy discussions with CPD. And for that, I will pass it to Commissioner Terry.
Commissioners Loizon and I have been working to provide feedback to CPD on the General Order G 08-03, which is prohibitions on associations with criminal organizations. On June 28th, the commission received a written response from CPD to our requested edits and clarifications. In response to our requests, CPD provided additional clarity, restrictions in terms of associations with certain groups and organizations, and agreed to the 3 specific recommendations we made, including renaming the order to prohibitions on criminal and bias-based organizations, using a broader label than criminal organizations to describe prohibitions, and added a section to the policy that specified the training requirements for staff. Commissioner Loizon and I are not yet clear on how CPD will integrate the recommendations made about the monitoring and assessment of the order's impact and efficacy, but we will discuss that with CPD at our next policy meeting, which will happen at the end of August.
Our next steps with this policy include this meeting with CPD to ensure commissioners' input is integrated and considered in this general order. Once the commission conditionally accepts these changes, we will solicit community input for 30 days per the ordinance. We expect that community input efforts for this policy will begin with our September commission meeting.
Well, I have a question, but I will defer to Commissioner Brown first.
Will there be a chance at some point for the public to see some kind of version of this that would show the original policy and then how you all have edited and changed it in partnership with CPD so that people can see where it went from the original to the kind of being proposed, what's being proposed?
I would say that we haven't gotten to that level of detail, but what we did do was provide the original policy that CPD had, and then we also gave out one-pagers and information about what our suggested changes were, or information about what the policy was, and then what our recommendations were. Like, we did talk about that, but that would be something we would have to work with staff likely to figure out how we could do a side-by-side comparison on what we have determined needed to change, and then what the final product would be. But this is still a process. So I would say that would be, a little ways.
I would just add to that, in making recommendations to CPD, we did not recommend specific language that we wanted added. What we did recommend were specific policy points that we wanted added. Ramel and I aren't experts on drafting policy. There's people at CPD who do that as, a regular course. So we left the drafting to them. And of course, we reviewed it and made changes and suggestions, but we would not be able to provide specific language that we requested be included because we didn't make that kind of request.
Yeah, if I can comment on that, I am glad that you raised that, Commissioner Brown. I think that's critical. A lot of us on this panel have organizing backgrounds, and that's one of the main things that we do is that you need to be able to show in some sort of infographic or one pager and layman's talk or plain language, not necessarily the exact policy language, but where we went. And I also think that that's really important for transparency purposes, to know where the two sides are and where we ultimately end up, because I think that's a check on us where the public can then hold us accountable. And so I would ask Adam, can we start doing that for, you don't have to say yes or no, but can we start, I would like us to start doing that for all of our policies. If obviously you two leading that working group are okay with that.
Yes, again, we did provide a one-pager on the policy in layman's terms to explain what it is. So what I hear Beth asking is about how we end up, right? How the policy turns out at the end in terms of the different iterations.
Yeah, and specifically, I think what I'm trying to get at is wanting people to know how our involvement with the policy ended up in changing the policy. And so however we show that piece, I think is important in terms of, again, the public holding us accountable for the work that we're doing related to policies. Did you want to?
So the ordinance that creates the commission and sets out the policymaking process actually requires that the commission post on its website the kind of stuff that Commissioner Brown is talking about. So not only can we do it, we have to do it.
Yes, okay, thank you. I guess the only thing that I would, the only question that I have, which is a question that I personally already know the answer to, but I think a lot of times when we talk about this stuff, it's like associations order, right? And I would imagine the average person doesn't know how this came about, why it came about, what the purpose of it is, outside of what we just laid out. So if either of you are willing to just give a very, very, very brief explainer on how we got to this point and the purpose of this actual order.
So prior to us having an opportunity to work with CPD staff on this particular general order, the order contemplated mostly street gangs, which were characterized as organized criminal organizations within the context of the general order. There wasn't contemplation for groups that I think we would characterize as hate groups being included within that. And I think we all paid attention to the press that demonstrated that there was a Chicago police officer who did have an affiliation with a group that we would characterize as a hate group. And a lot of community members provided feedback to the commission that they were extremely concerned and disappointed with the fact that that particular officer had not been appropriately disciplined in light of his affiliation and still is a member of the Chicago Police Department. With that information, the general order became a big priority for Ramel and I. And I do think, you know, in fairness, we should also say that it was a priority for the Chicago Police Department as well. Our process in working on this particular general order has been extremely collaborative, and Ramel and I's suggestions have been met with, you know, excellent collaboration. I think we've made like great progress in improving this particular general order, and it has been a good working process. So, as Ramel indicated before, there were three main areas that we paid a lot of attention to. One was making sure that the title was clear, that it was intended to include individuals who participated in hate groups. The second was expanding the definition of who was eligible to be subject to this general order so that it didn't focus on people involved in quote unquote criminal organizations. One of the concerns that we had with that language and terminology is that various groups that could be characterized as hate groups don't necessarily have to engage in activity that's criminal for it to be discriminatory and wholly improper for a police officer to participate in. So we wanted to ensure that that language was expanded. And we also felt that training about the parameters of this general order and expectations about non-participation in groups of that nature was extremely important. So we worked to include a training component to the general order, which from my perspective, and I think I can safely speak for Ramel on this, we felt like was a very big win. We don't generally always see the training component piece in general orders. And so we felt that that was extremely important. We were very pleased that CPD was amenable to it. In addition to that, we are working to build in a component to the general order that will permit the commission to be able to monitor progress on that training and how the general order is being implemented and otherwise communicated and conveyed to Chicago police officers who are coming to work every day and need to operate within the confines of the order. That piece is a piece that we have not finalized yet. We're still working on it. I just want to be clear, it's not because it's being met with resistance. It's just a little bit of a different process than what has ever been included in a general order before. So we're working to figure out the best way to implement language and create a process whereby that kind of oversight is effective and possible. So I hope that was clear.
That was very helpful. I don't know the legality of this, but there's a person, and I don't want to butcher his name, so I'll just call him a guy for now, who I've met a few times, and he sent a bunch of emails, both to myself and I think maybe the chairman of the Public Safety Committee, and city council members, and he has said that, I guess based on the original order, he's like FOIA'd for this list a bunch of times, and the police department hasn't been able to produce it. And so I don't know how that works, but if there's a way to have this somewhere, maybe on our commission site, that once it's all said and done, like have the actual list of organizations that are prohibited, because I'm assuming there would have to be some sort of like definitive list, right?
So,
Oh, go ahead, Ramel. No, go ahead.
thank you for raising that, President Driver. So yes, that is a conversation that we, one of our most recent meetings, we've been having that conversation because we know that the Southern Poverty Law Center, right? You're speaking of that guy?
Yeah.
Because he came to one of our past meetings. And so in our last conversation with our team, we talked about that. So that's something in our meeting when we go to meet with CPD that we are going to further discuss and figure out internally what that looks like in terms of us hosting that and what sort of additional requirements that would have on us in terms of the maintenance of that. So it's still a conversation, but that is something that has been discussed.
Okay.
Just one more point to that. We've also discussed the wisdom of having a list that specifies specific groups, because we have a concern that does provide, a wormhole, if you will, if you belong to a group that is engaging in hate-related activity, but happens to not be on the list. We want to make sure that there are mechanisms in place for there to be an assessment of whether a particular group is in fact a hate group, whether or not its name appears on a specific list, because in theory, today you could be Citizens Against Redheads, and tomorrow you could be Communities Against Redheads, and now you're not on the list. So we are talking about ways to, different mechanisms for considering how to make it a little bit more broad, frankly, so that we don't run into that. And also whether or not there's wisdom in trying to formulate a different mechanism for assessing that doesn't involve an actual concrete list.
I have another question. Is that okay, President Driver? So in our conversation right here, we've been using the term hate groups. And I noticed that it's called biased based in the general order. So can you say something about why you chose or why the group chose bias based versus hate groups?
Beth, I don't actually know the answer to that, why the language bias based was specifically used. Again, we didn't do the drafting. However, we did believe that the term bias based was appropriate and encompassed the types of groups that we were concerned about. And I would say that, like, as I describe it, I think hate group would be a term of like a colloquial term, whereas bias based might be more of a term of art. But that is, that's just my assumption. But I do think that the words bias based we believed encompassed the kind of conduct that we were concerned about.
I think, so I definitely hear what you're saying. It feels to me to soften it. And so what I would like to request is that you all look at what is the language being used. So for example, if you're going to look at a list that the Southern Poverty Law Center has, are they using the language hate group, or are they using the language bias-based? What is the ACLU using? Are they using bias-based, or are they using hate groups? And I feel like we would do well to kind of know, like, legally, what are the names being used for those groups? And then I would ask, if we're going to choose bias-based as the final language, I think there needs to be some real substance behind why we would choose that term instead of hate group. And to me, there's a little bit of a difference in terms of, so I'm the queer representative on this commission, so we could use that as an example. There might be a lot of people who are biased against queer people, but a hate group, when it comes to queer people, is a really different thing. And so, there are a lot of religious organizations, for example, that are biased against queer folks. I'm not sure they would be considered a bias-based group, but when it gets to the level of harassment and all of those things, then it becomes a hate group, even if it's a religious group. So I do feel like there are distinctions, and I'm not the expert on this either. And I want this order to be very clear, because I think what we saw at the city council meeting, the special meeting that happened around this, the language needs to be very clear around this.
So Beth, I just want to make it clear that there is a definition included in the general order of what that language means. And I totally see your point when you say it sounds softer. I would respectfully just push back on that a little bit and say that it may sound softer, but I would argue that bias-based is a term that provides an opportunity to encompass more groups, not less. And that was one of the reasons why we felt that that language was actually favorable, because just like the example that you provided, there may be groups that, you're right, you couldn't characterize as a hate group, but they do have a significant bias against a specific group. And it would be our position that people who participate in those kinds of groups should not, be Chicago police officers. So that language in particular was appealing to us for that reason. And I think I probably should not have used the words hate group, and I should have used the language that was in the actual order. But I think hate group is the term that most people are most familiar with.
And I'll just echo those sentiments. Like, as you were speaking, that was the thing. If the initial order was very limiting in terms of who it included, and we wanted to ensure that as much as possible, we could have a catch-all so that we could have as few people as possible flying under the radar when it comes to certain behaviors that we just find unacceptable.
Can I just raise one other thing then? So, and we're having this conversation live, so, hope you all understand that. Okay, so here's where I don't understand it then. Because in addition to being a queer representative, I'm also a pastor. And there are many religious organizations, many churches around the city of Chicago that are absolutely anti-queer folks. One church on the South Side expelled all of their members who identified as queer. What if a Chicago Police Department officer was a member of that church, where they literally expelled every queer person? then that organization is a bias-based organization, although I haven't read the definition, so forgive me. So I'm just trying to understand like some of it feels fuzzy in that way, because I don't think we would mean to say that, so, the religious stuff gets tricky too. So I'm not trying to open a whole new can of worms, but I'm trying to understand, because that's a bias-based organization. In my mind, in terms of they have a real bias to the point where they kicked out every single person that's in this group. And so if officers are members of that group, then what happens?
So I think there's like multiple different implications, and not to get into the weeds of like a constitutional law discussion, but I think the most simple way for me to answer your question is this. The term is defined in the ordinance. I don't have the definition in front of me. Having reviewed the definition, I would say that the definition is clear enough that there's guidance on what does and does not qualify, number one. Number two, CPD would not be permitted by law, without getting into the reasons why, to necessarily have general orders that would be discriminatory on the basis of religion or any other protected group. However, I also want to point out that as with any general order or any special order or any Illinois statute or any, federal law, there's always room for number one, interpretation, and number two, application in appropriate circumstances. So I think, with general orders, just because you maybe can implicate a person under a general order doesn't always mean that you should. So it's not like these general orders rob all discretion from the people who are enforcing them. There's still an opportunity for discretion, and we believe that the definition provided gives guidance to help make sure that that discretion is utilized in a reasonable fashion, but there is always some discretion.
Thanks. Sure.
That's a definition.
Yep.
You want to?
While everyone's reading, I do just want to add that in the public comment period, community members will certainly have an opportunity to provide feedback and even specific language suggestions if that's what they would like to do, that we will absolutely consider. So that's, another opportunity.
So do you see the note?
If there,
How about a quick non-definition related comment? The Chicago Police Department has a dashboard. I think it's called the Policy Forum, where they post all the different policies that they've been reviewing over the years. It's pretty easy to find, and they have previous versions, not all the previous versions, but a lot of previous versions of policies that they've updated and so on. This doesn't appear on the Policy Forum, and I wonder if there are sort of internal mechanisms for how they post stuff on the Policy Forum. I know we normally don't allow outside comment. I don't necessarily want to invite outside comment from CPD, but I think it might be a good practice for us to post not just on our website and the commission's website, but also on this massive dashboard that they have, the things that we're agreeing to negotiate or talk about. I find a lot of the policies that I'm looking for on that dashboard. I think a lot of community members are used to going to that dashboard to go and see, oh, this policy that I was thinking about is there. So just making sure that whatever policy we're working on is also appearing on that I think it's called Policy Forum, would be a good practice for us moving forward.
So,
I'm not necessarily familiar with CPD's practices and posting. I would just caution based on that comment that I worry that it might not be entirely productive to post it until it's in the position where we believe we've gotten to the point where it's finalized enough that we're ready to receive comment. At this juncture, we're not there because we're still trying to work things out. So it would, I agree with you that like it should certainly be posted in places where people are familiar with looking. I don't know that, I'm entirely comfortable with posting things before they're, fully baked.
Just in.
it's okay. All right. We are like really getting in the weeds now, y'all. So if there's like one more comment. You have one more thing?
Just a question.
No, well, not a question, a comment. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to cut this part off, but I think we were like getting really deep into, but maybe I should have let you do it because Charlie can't open his laptop now. So just as a reminder, you can follow the commission on all of our social media pages, on Facebook.com/Chicago CCPSA, Instagram CCPSA_Chicago. That's the same for Twitter. And on YouTube, it's at Chicago CCPSA. Our next meeting will be held on Thursday, August 31st at 6:30 p.m. Is there any further business before the commission before we move to a recess? Hearing none, I would like to thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll be moving to recess this meeting. We need to go into a closed session to discuss police board nominees. And so we don't want to end this meeting, but we will. Does that need to be motion? It's not on here.
Second.
Got you. We will be ending this meeting now and going into closed session. We hope to see you on August 31st, and we hope you'll stay engaged and encouraged people you know to join us in this work. With there being no further business before the commission in accordance with Section 2C3 of the Open Meetings Act, we will now recess this meeting to the call of the chair and go into closed session for the purpose of considering candidates for the appointment of the police board. Thank you.
Thank you all. Straight down the other way. Those are really good questions.